Hello, my dear friends. Today, I want to share with you a message that's been stirring in my heart. A message about the unwavering hand of God that guides us through every twist and turn of life. You know, life can often feel like a winding road with unexpected detours. We face challenges that seem insurmountable, storms that threaten to overwhelm us, and valleys that seem too deep to cross. But through it all, there's a divine hand reaching out to us, ready to lead us to calm waters. Think back to the story of Moses and the Israelites. Remember when they stood at the edge of the Red Sea, with Pharaoh's army closing in behind them? Fear and doubt must have gripped their hearts. The sea before them, an army behind them. Talk about being between a rock and a hard place. But Moses told them, "Do not be afraid. Stand firm, and you will see the deliverance the Lord will bring you today." Exodus 14 verse 13. And what happened next? God parted the Red Sea, making a way where there seemed to be no way. Isn't that just like our lives sometimes? We stand facing obstacles that appear impossible to overcome. A lost job, a broken relationship, a health crisis. The waves of adversity seem to rise higher and higher. But just as God parted the Red Sea for the Israelites, He can create a path for us through our toughest trials. His hand is never too short to save, and His ear is never too dull to hear. Isaiah 59 verse 1. I recall a story about a woman named Sarah who lost her job unexpectedly. She was the sole provider for her family, and the news hit her like a ton of bricks. Bills piled up and anxiety set in. Every day felt like a battle against fear and uncertainty. But instead of succumbing to despair, Sarah turned to God. She spent time in prayer, seeking His guidance and pouring out her heart. One day, she felt a nudge to start a small baking business from her kitchen. It seemed insignificant at first, just a few cupcakes and cookies for neighbors. But over time, her business grew beyond her wildest dreams. She often says that losing her job was the best thing that ever happened to her because it led her to discover her true calling. Sarah's story mirrors the biblical account of Joseph. Remember how Joseph was sold into slavery by his own brothers and later unjustly imprisoned in Egypt? It seemed like everything was against him, yet, throughout his hardships, the hand of God was at work. In Genesis 50 verse 20, Joseph tells his brothers, "You intended to harm me, but God intended it for good to accomplish what is now being done, the saving of many lives." Joseph's journey was filled with pits and prisons, but it ultimately led to a palace where he could save a nation. Sometimes what we perceive as setbacks are actually setups for something greater. God's hand is not just there to pull us out of the pit. It's there to position us for our purpose. He is the master weaver, intricately threading the tapestry of our lives, even when we can't see the full picture. It's like looking at the backside of a beautiful embroidery. It may look like a mess of threads and knots, but on the other side, a masterpiece is taking shape. Another story that comes to mind is that of David facing Goliath. A young shepherd boy against a giant warrior. By all human standards, David didn't stand a chance. The armor didn't fit him, the weapons were too heavy, and the odds were stacked against him. But David declared, "The battle is the Lord's, and He will give all of you into our hands." 1 Samuel 17 verse 47. With a single stone and unwavering faith, David defeated Goliath. What giants are you facing today? Is it fear, doubt, financial struggles, or perhaps a challenge that seems too big to handle? Remember that the same God who empowered David is with you. He equips the called, and his strength is made perfect in our weakness. 2 Corinthians 12 verse 9. All we need to do is place our trust in him and step forward in faith. Let me share another testimony. A man named Michael was battling addiction for years. He felt trapped, ashamed, and hopeless. He had tried to quit many times but always found himself back at square one. One night, at his lowest point, he cried out to God for help. He felt an overwhelming sense of peace wash over him, a peace that surpassed all understanding. Philippians 4 verse 7. From that moment, he began his journey to recovery. It wasn't easy. There were relapses and setbacks, but he felt God's hand guiding him each step of the way. Today, Michael helps others overcome their struggles, turning his past into a beacon of hope. God's hand is not just about delivering us from our troubles. It's also about transforming us through them. Like clay in the potter's hands, we are molded and shaped through life's experiences. Jeremiah 18 verse 6. Our trials can refine us, building character, perseverance, and hope. Romans 5 verses 3 to 4. It's in the fire that gold is purified, and sometimes it's in our toughest times that we grow the most. So how can we become more attuned to God's presence and guidance in our lives? First, we need to cultivate a relationship with him. Just like any relationship, it requires time and communication. Spend time in prayer, not just speaking but also listening. Sometimes we rush through our prayers like we're ticking off a to-do list, but God desires a heartfelt conversation with us. Open your heart to his word by reading the scriptures. Psalm 119 verse 105 says, "Your word is a lamp for my feet, a light on my path." The Bible is not just a historical document. It's a living guide that illuminates our way, offering wisdom, comfort, and direction. Secondly, surround yourself with a community of believers. We were not meant to walk this journey alone. Proverbs 27 verse 17 tells us, "As iron sharpens iron, so one person sharpens another." Sharing our experiences, challenges, and victories with others strengthens our faith and encourages us to keep pressing forward. Maybe join a small group, participate in church activities, or simply have regular fellowship with friends who uplift you. Thirdly, be open to the leading of the Holy Spirit. Sometimes, God's guidance comes in subtle nudges or unexpected opportunities. Be attentive and willing to step out of your comfort zone. Isaiah 30 verse 21 reminds us, "Whether you turn to the right or to the left, your ears will hear a voice behind you, saying, 'This is the way. Walk in it.'" It's like that gentle whisper that Elijah heard, not in the wind or the earthquake, but in the still small voice. 1 Kings 19 verse 12. Let's also remember the story of Peter walking on water. When the disciples saw Jesus walking on the sea, Peter asked to join him. Jesus said, "Come." Peter stepped out of the boat and began walking toward Jesus. But when he saw the wind and the waves, he became afraid and started to sink. Immediately, Jesus reached out his hand and caught him. Matthew 14 verses 29 to 31. The lesson here is profound. When we keep our eyes on Jesus, we're able to rise above the storms. But even when doubt creeps in and we start to falter, his hand is right there to catch us. He doesn't let us drown in our fears or failures. His grip is firm and his love is steadfast. In modern times, perhaps you're like Peter, stepping out in faith toward a new venture, a new relationship, or a new stage in life. The winds of uncertainty may blow, and the waves of doubt may crash around you, but keep your eyes fixed on Jesus. Trust trust that His hand is strong enough to hold you, even when you feel weak. Another practical step is to practice gratitude. It's easy to focus on what's going wrong and overlook the blessings in our lives. Take time each day to thank God for the big and small things. The sunrise, a kind word from a friend, a meal on your table. Gratitude shifts our perspective and opens our eyes to see God's hand at work in ways we might have missed otherwise. Remember the story of the 10 lepers healed by Jesus, where only one returned to give thanks, Luke 17 verses 15 to 17. Jesus noted the gratitude of the one, emphasizing the importance of acknowledging God's work in our lives. When we're grateful, we become more aware of His continuous provision and guidance. It cultivates a heart that is sensitive to His presence. Now, you might be thinking, but sometimes I don't feel God's presence. What do I do then? That's a valid feeling, and you're not alone. Even King David cried out, "How long, Lord, will you forget me forever? How long will you hide your face from me?" Psalm 13 verse 1. In those moments, it's important to remember that faith isn't based on our feelings, but on God's unchanging character. He promises, "Never will I leave you. Never will I forsake you." Hebrews 13 verse 5. In times of silence, continue to seek Him. Be persistent in prayer, immerse yourself in His Word, and trust that He is working behind the scenes. Often, it's in hindsight that we see how His hand was guiding us all along. It's like walking through a dark tunnel. You may not see the light immediately, but if you keep moving forward, you'll eventually emerge into the brightness. Let's also consider the story of the disciples after Jesus' resurrection. On the road to Emmaus, they were walking with Jesus but didn't recognize Him until later when He broke bread with them. Luke 24 verses 13 to 31. Sometimes, we're so consumed by our circumstances that we fail to see Jesus walking right beside us. Let's ask God to open our eyes to His presence in our daily lives. Perhaps you're familiar with the footprints in the sand poem, where a person looks back on their life and sees two sets of footprints during the good times, but only one set during the hardest times. They question God, asking why He left them when they needed Him most. God replies, "It was then that I carried you." It's a beautiful reminder that God's hand is carrying us, even when we don't realize it. As we journey through life, let's hold on to the promise found in Isaiah 41 verse 10. "So do not fear, for I am with you. Do not be dismayed, for I am your God. I will strengthen you and help you. I will uphold you with my righteous right hand." This isn't just a nice sentiment. It's a powerful assurance that the Creator of the universe is personally invested in you. He knows your name, your struggles, your dreams, and He cares deeply for you. In times of uncertainty, remember Jeremiah 29 verse 11, where God says, "For I know the plans I have for you, plans to prosper you and not to harm you, plans to give you hope and a future." Even when we can't see the road ahead, we can trust that God's plans are for our good. Let me share another biblical story that beautifully illustrates God's guiding hand. The story of Ruth. After the death of her husband and sons, Naomi decided to return to Bethlehem, her homeland. She urged her daughters-in-law to stay in Moab, but Ruth clung to her, saying, "Where you go, I will go, and where you stay, I will stay. Your people will be my people, and your God my God." Ruth 1 verse 16. Ruth, a Moabite woman, left everything familiar to her to follow Naomi and serve the God of Israel. In Bethlehem, Ruth gleaned in the fields to provide for herself and Naomi. It was there she met Boaz, a man of standing who would become her kinsman redeemer. Through a series of divine appointments, Ruth not only found provision but also became part of the lineage of Jesus Christ. Her story shows how God's hand guides us when we commit ourselves to Him, even in the face of loss and uncertainty. In our lives, we may face situations where we have to make tough choices, leave behind the familiar, or step into the unknown. Ruth's story encourages us to trust in God's providence. When we align our hearts with His, He orchestrates events in ways we could never imagine. Consider also the story of Daniel in the lion's den. Daniel was a man of unwavering faith, praying to God 3 times a day despite a royal decree that forbade it. As a result, he was thrown into a den of lions. But God's hand was upon him. The next morning, the king found Daniel unharmed, and Daniel said, "My God sent his angel, and he shut the mouths of the lions." Daniel 6 verse 22. Daniel's faithfulness, even in the face of death, demonstrates the power of trusting in God. It shows that God's hand can protect us in the most dangerous situations. Maybe you're facing a lion's den of your own, pressures at work, persecution for your beliefs, or overwhelming challenges. Take heart in knowing that God's hand can shut the mouths of the lions in your life. Let's bring this into a modern context with the story of a young man named Alex. Alex felt called to serve in a remote village as a teacher. The area was known for its harsh conditions and lack of resources. Many people questioned his decision, telling him it was dangerous and unwise. But Alex felt a deep conviction that this was where God wanted him to be. Despite the challenges Alex went, he faced illness, cultural barriers, and isolation. But through it all, he witnessed incredible transformations. Children who had no hope of an education were learning to read and write. A community that was divided began to unite. Alex often says that it was only by God's hand that he was able to endure and make a difference. His story reminds us that when we follow God's leading, His hand empowers us to accomplish more than we could on our own. Now, let's talk about how we can practically deepen our relationship with God to become more attuned to His presence. One way is through worship. Worship isn't just about singing songs on a Sunday morning. It's a lifestyle of honoring God in all we do. When we worship, we shift our focus from our problems to His greatness. As Psalm 22 verse 3 says, "God inhabits the praises of His people." In worship, we draw near to Him and become more sensitive to His guidance. Another way is through serving others. Jesus said, "The Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve." Matthew 20 verse 28. When we serve others, we become extensions of God's hand to those in need. It not only blesses others, but also enriches our own lives. Serving can open doors to experiences and relationships that deepen our faith. Prayer and fasting are also powerful practices. Fasting helps us to deny the flesh and focus on the Spirit. It's a way of saying, "God, I need you more than I need food." It heightens our spiritual awareness and helps us to hear God's voice more clearly. Moreover, journaling can be a valuable tool. Writing down your prayers, thoughts, and the ways you've seen God work in your life can be a source of encouragement. It allows you to look back and see the faithfulness of God's hand over time. Let's revisit the idea of trust. Trusting God isn't always easy, especially when circumstances are tough. Proverbs 3 verses 5 to 6 advises us, "Trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways submit to Him, and He will make your paths straight." Trust involves surrendering our plans and embracing God's, even when we don't understand. An example of this is the story of Abraham and Isaac. God tested Abraham by asking him to sacrifice his beloved son Isaac. It was an unimaginable request, but Abraham obeyed, trusting that God had a plan. At the last moment, God provided a ram as a substitute sacrifice. Genesis 22 verse 13. Abraham named that place, "The Lord will provide." This story shows that when we trust God completely, He provides in ways that affirm His faithfulness. In our own lives, we might be holding on to things tightly, our plans, our possessions, our loved ones. God invites us to place everything in His hands, trusting that He knows what's best. It's not about losing what we have, but about gaining what He wants to give us. As we navigate life's journey, let's be mindful of the importance of patience. Sometimes we expect immediate answers or quick fixes, but God's timing is perfect. Ecclesiastes 3 verse 11 says, "He has made everything beautiful in its time." Waiting can be challenging, but it's often during the waiting periods that we grow the most. Consider the Israelites wandering in the desert for 40 years. It was a long and arduous journey, but it was during this time that they learned to depend on God daily, for manna from heaven, for guidance, for protection. The desert was a place of testing, but also a place of preparation for the promised land. In your own desert experiences, remember that God's hand is still guiding you. He hasn't forgotten you. He is preparing you for the blessings ahead. As Isaiah 40 verse 31 encourages us, "But those who hope in the Lord will renew their strength. They will soar on wings like eagles." Let's also not forget the importance of forgiveness in our walk with God. Holding on to grudges or past hurts can hinder our ability to experience His fullness. Jesus taught us to forgive others as we have been forgiven. Matthew 6 verses 14 to 15. Forgiveness frees us and allows God's healing hand to restore relationships and bring peace to our hearts. In all these things, the key is to keep our hearts open to God's work. Sometimes, we may resist His hand because it leads us in directions we didn't anticipate or desire. But like a skilled surgeon, God sometimes has to make incisions to remove what harms us, even if it causes temporary discomfort. Trusting in His wisdom and love enables us to embrace His guidance. As we come to a close, I want to leave you with this powerful truth. God's hand is not just upon you, it goes before you. Deuteronomy 31 verse 8 promises, "The Lord Himself goes before you and will be with you. He will never leave you nor forsake you. He's already in your tomorrow, preparing the way." So whatever you're facing, be it mountains too high to climb, valleys too deep to cross, or storms too fierce to withstand, know that you don't have to face them alone. The same God who was with Moses, Joseph, David, Ruth, Daniel, and countless others is with you. His hand is mighty to save, gentle to comfort, and strong to guide. Embrace His presence. Seek His face. Allow His hand to lead you into the abundant life He has planned for you. Remember, now to Him who is able to do immeasurably more than all we ask or imagine, according to His power that is at work within us. Ephesians 3 verse 20. Let this truth sink into your heart. God's hand will see you through. No matter the storm, no matter the obstacle, His love for you is steadfast and unchanging. For I am convinced that neither death nor life, neither angels nor demons, neither the present nor the future, will be able to separate us from the love of God that is in Christ Jesus our Lord. Romans 8 verses 38 to 39. So lift your head, take a deep breath, and step forward with confidence. The hand of God is not just reaching out to you, it's holding on to you tightly. Trust in Him, and you'll find that He not only sees you through, but also leads you into a future brighter than you can imagine. May you walk in peace, anchored in hope, and filled with the assurance that God's hand will always see you through.